Hey friends, welcome to the channel today. So, the plan today is very simple. However, we're going to do something a little bit controversial today. We're going to talk about the entire season of The Legend of Korra Season 2, the one that everybody hates so dearly much. We're going to just break it down episode by episode. We won't spend too much time on each episode, but it will be enough to at least kind of extrapolate what happens in the episode and then what the theme of that episode is. And then, as we kind of go through, I want to explain a little bit about how I truly do not feel that this season is as bad as everyone says it is. So, chill out, buckle up, relax. This is going to be a one take. I'm only doing this a one take, and it's going to be a beautiful, beautiful little rendition of why Season 2 of Korra is just not as bad as everyone thinks. So let's get going. So, let's start with episode 1. The Rebel Spirit, right? The core of this episode is Korra returns to the Southern Water Tribe to find it under attack by dark spirits, something she has never encountered before. Tenzin tries to guide Korra spiritually, but his rigid methods frustrate her. Her uncle Unalaq, chief of the Northern Water Tribe, arrives and quickly proves far more adept at calming spirits, impressing Korra. Unalaq criticizes Tone Rag's past leadership and claims the South has lost its spiritual roots. Korra, feeling disconnected from her spirituality and resentful of Tenzin's failures, begins to trust Unalaq instead. This strains her relationship with her father and her mentor. What is the theme here? The theme here is the danger of mistaking confidence and authority for wisdom. Unalaq presents himself in this episode as someone who is very, very strong, almost militant, but yet he's seemingly able to have much more control and much more of a calmer demeanor, which Korra is attracted to, like from a mentorial aspect, and she believes that he is able to help her. Now, episode 1 starts to show something that we will see as a common theme throughout this entire season, which is the spiritual realm and how crucial it is. Season 2 does something much later on, which has the entire Avatar mythos in a really huge and just gigantic debate that has spanned for years and that has called Korra to be the worst avatar in existence, that has slandered her, that has appended her as being so much far worse than Aang because of her erasure of the past avatar cycles and essentially beginning a brand new era. And what I have to say to that is that Korra genuinely, not only is she a good avatar, but she is the radical change that was needed. And it was actually in response to the world already telling her that the avatar is not needed anymore. Because in Aang's time and Aang's era of being the avatar was still very, 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 very highly acclaimed as being the bridge between spirit and human. And in the modern day and in the modern world, that's not really the case that much anymore. What we find as Korra goes through this season and honestly later seasons is that the Avatar's place in the world is completely different, and she has to forge her own path. And as we get to harmonic convergence is really the epicenter of what Korra needed to do in order to yet again allow the Avatar to become the true bridge between spirit and human. And we'll get there, right? Episode 2, The Southern Lights. Unalaq convinces Korra that the Southern Water Tribe must restore its spiritual connection by reopening an ancient spirit portal at the South Pole. Korra helps him despite her parents' objections. When the portal opens, floods the area, transforming the landscape. Tonreg reveals his past. Years earlier, Unalaq manipulated him into leading an attack on a spirit forest, resulting in destruction and Tonrag's banishment. Korra realizes she may be repeating history by trusting Unalaq too easily. Which, yes, because the theme here is history repeats itself when its lessons are ignored. And really, this episode is just, again, showing that history in itself is very, very crucial. And one thing that I feel like is very controversial is that I actually do feel like, to an extent, the past avatars, while of course being an amazing guiding spiritual force, they in a sense are history. And they in a sense, like, while they bring so much knowledge and wisdom to the table, if a avatar in the current day is not able to forge their own path, then wouldn't they run into various situations and various ramifications of the previous avatar's actions? In some ways that can be good, and in some ways that can be beautiful and amazing, but there can be another world where that honestly can bring back some repeated mistakes. And that's a lot. And again, I know that's a huge point of contention. We might have some angry keyboard warriors, and I beg you, Timmy, to please put down the keyboard. I don't hate you. I like you, actually. I want you to stick around here, and I want you to sit with me, Timmy, as we just kind of continue to walk through the season here. But yeah, Korra realizes that she may be repeating history by trusting Unalaq. And I feel like that will come up a little bit later. And remember that, okay? Episode 3, Civil Wars Part 1. The Northern Water Tribe occupies as the South under the guise of restoring order. So, essentially, there is a low-key invasion. They be sliding up in there, and now they are wanting to take over that side of the tribe. Civil war looms as Southern rebels resist. Korra struggles with her role as the Avatar. Again, this is so important. She wants to stay neutral, but feels morally compelled to help her home. All right? Now, I'm going to pause here for just a second because I want to expound on something. Korra is struggling with her role here because she is seeing the other nations act on their own impulses and act as of what they believe is right. And what Korra has learned is that it's the Avatar's duty to balance. It's the Avatar's duty to take on the mantle of the current world, take on the mantle of everything and all the idiosyncrasies of life that is happening in the present, and asserting all of that forward into essentially trying to build a new path, build the current path for the world that she's living in. And staying neutral is part of that. Staying neutral and just kind of willing on not even necessarily the side of right and wrong, because if we go back to the original Avatar series, there was no pure good and there was no pure bad. There was a lot of orange morality that took place back then. There were so many examples, especially when we think about a spirit such as Heibai, the spirit of the forest. The spirit of the forest back then didn't necessarily want to be a moral, huge grandstanding of good versus evil. Heibai only felt like they needed to protect the forest when threatened, because they are the guardian of that forest. They are the guardian and they are the epicenter and the balance of that forest. And so once something attacks that forest and makes Heibai feel activated, that's when Heibai has to essentially show themselves as the quote-unquote monster. But really, Heibai's transformation into the monster that ends up becoming, the gigantic creature with all the arms, that is a essence of the spirit's wrath because of humans' ability to not put down the knife, to not put down a semblance for the spiritual beings and for the creatures that inhabit the forest, right? But yeah, moving on back to Civil Wars Part 1. Mako investigates corruption tied to Unalaq, while Bolin becomes the face of a propaganda campaign led by the businessman Varric, highlighting how media manipulates public opinion. Neutrality becomes complacency when injustice is present. That's the main theme of Episode 3, Civil Wars Part 1. And you can see how that could cause some strain with Korra, and how that could cause some strain with, honestly, other people surrounding Korra, because they all want her to pick a side, but she's wanting to remain as a peaceful barrier to all of those sides. And then on top of that, we also have her trying to understand what is her role as the Avatar, because again, in the modern world, it's so constantly challenged, and she gets to a point to where she needs to figure out if she's going to either stay as the Avatar, as what has always been the Avatar, and continue to maintain the role in society that has always been, the Avatar, or is she going to forge her new path? Which, of course, we find out that she does. Spoiler alert, right? Civil Wars Part 2. Korra openly sides with the Southern rebels, abandoning neutrality. Mako uncovers evidence that Unalaq orchestrated attacks to justify the occupation, but his findings are suppressed and he is arrested. Korra breaks him out, confirming her break from Unalaq. This is a really, really hard line in the sand that Korra does make, because originally she was seeing him as someone who she could learn from, seeing him as someone who she could really gain a lot of new integral counterpoints as a leader, right? But at the end of the day, he ended up showing his true self, showing his evil intentions, which then, of course, brushes up with Korra, and then she decides to kind of separate from him here. And the theme here, well, hold on. The Water Tribe conflict escalates beyond politics into personal betrayal. And see, now Korra is personally affected, which is why she makes that break from neutrality, and why she feels like more so emboldened as not only an Avatar, but as Korra the human, Korra the person. Korra's trust and authority further erodes, right? Truth threatens power, and power will try to silence it. I feel like, honestly, I don't think we need to go that much deeper into that. Episode 5. Peacekeepers. Korra seeks guidance from her past lives to help her stop the war, but is unable to connect spiritually. Let's pause there for just a second. Why do we think that other than the fact that maybe, Korra is stressed, or maybe Korra is not able to tap into our spiritual self, why do you think that she is having a little bit of trouble connecting to the past lives? I feel like this is actually foreshadowing a little bit more into the future of Korra trying to eventually find her own path and break away from the Avatar cycle. She travels to Republic City and asks world's leader for military intervention. They refuse, fearing global conflict. Feeling abandoned by both her past lives and the world's leader, Korra grows increasingly isolated and emotionally vulnerable, making her easier for Unalaq to manipulate again. She broke away from Unalaq in the past, but now, because of everything that is going on in the present, her feeling isolated and cannot connect to her past selves, because season 2 is showing something very, very important, and it's that Korra needs to break away from the past in order to find a new future. I feel like this point has been missed on so many Avatar fans because they don't like harmonic convergence. But I step off that soapbox for now. Let's continue forward a little bit more, right? Leadership is lonely. That's the theme. And desperation clouds judgment. Episode 6, The Sting. Mako uncovers that Varric orchestrated attacks to profit from the Civil War. Through the truth is exposed, Unalaq uses his influence to have Varric arrested while maintaining control. This reveals how deeply Unalaq manipulates both spiritual and political system. Korra begins to suspect Unalaq's spiritual agenda may hide darker motives. Justice is power. Justice without power is fragile. That's the core theme of episode 6. I feel like that's pretty straightforward there. I don't think there's really much more to deep dive as far as episode 6. Episode 7. Beginnings, part 1. Now, leading up to this is obviously when Korra was, unfortunately, beaten to a pulp, essentially, as she is starting to kind of come into her own here, as she's really starting to make a strong kind of upheaval against Unalaq's system, while he is trying to become, in essence, a dark avatar. Korra is seeing in real time how Unalaq's power isn't really what she would kind of think that it is, right? It's not, sorry, I said that poorly. Essentially, Unalaq's power is very strong, but it comes from a warded and warped mindset of kind of self-inflicted pain and self-inflicted misery, and he's kind of wanting to overcorrect the state of the world by trying to make everything bend into his will and bend into his own subjugation for this world, while not truly understanding a person's own will and understanding a person's own kind of mindset when it comes to peace, when it comes to how to rule, when it comes to independence and striving for a better future. Now, episode 7 starts the beginnings episode, right? And this is when Korra is like separated from Rava in a sense, and she is just trying to see what happened, and this is where the controversy begins. Korra experiences a vision showing the ancient world before the Avatar existed. We meet Wan, a human who lives among lion turtles. After freeing the dark spirit Vatu, Wan accidentally unleashes chaos upon the world. Wan later befriends Rava, the spirit of light, and learns that balance, not domination, is the key to harmony. Good intentions can unleash intended consequences. Now, let's just stop here and really focus on Beginnings Part 1, and then we will talk about Beginnings Part 2. When we are in Beginnings Part 1, Wan is shown as the first avatar, essentially, to ever exist. He is shown as a normal human who does gain the ability to bend been the elements, and after Vatu is free, we see quote unquote darkness spread across the world. One of the biggest things that really has the whole Avatar community into a tizzy here is that we feel like the orange morality is gone and that it is just darkness and light that is present. Is chaos inherently, I know this might sound insane, but I need everybody to sit with me. When it comes to the Avatar universe, I'm not talking about chaos and the world that I know today. I'm talking about in the Avatar universe. Is chaos really just black and evil? Are the spirits that show themselves in this world after being quote unquote contaminated by Vatu, are they evil? Or are they really just showing other appended versions of themselves, which are in the chaos category, which doesn't necessarily mean they are wholly evil beings, but they allowed the worst parts of them to kind of run a little bit wild and rampant and free. And now we are in a space right now where the time is now ruling that the chaos is jumping forward, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're evil. It's just like they're self-centered and they're selfish, and chaos is not inherently evil as much as it is allowing balances in our inner selves to be unchecked. I feel like that's much more of what it's saying, and then rather that the spirit of light is balance, not necessarily good versus evil, not necessarily Christianic God versus Satan, but that Rava more so represents balance. And I know you're like, okay, but what about yin and yang? They are literally forming yin and yang when Rava and Vatu are formed together, and they are in a ball and they are like rolling and tussling back and forth, which is essentially arguing like good versus evil. I feel like we don't understand what pure yin energy is and yang energy is, because they're not as much evil as we would more so think, or what we would call them to be. But yin and yang are really more orange reality than what we would like to say here. Because like, for instance, let me just kind of pull up the definition here of yin and yang. So they are opposite complementary forces which are interconnected and independent, creating a dynamic balance which is essential for all things in the universe, symbolized by the familiar black and white swirling symbol. So yin, black, right, which would be much more akin to Vatu, is dark, passive, receptive, cold, earth, moon, stillness, water. Yang, meaning light, active, assertive, haven, sun, movement, fire, and outside. Interdependence. One cannot exist without the other. They define each other. The sunny side of hill, yang, the shaded side, yin. Dynamic balance. They are in constant flux, shifting and transforming into each other like the day turning into night. Inclusion. Each contains a seed of the other, showing that nothing is purely yin or purely yang. Achieving balance between these forces is crucial, right? So yin, which would be much more akin to Vatu in that diagram, doesn't necessarily represent full-on evil, while dark is a part of it. It's more so, okay, think about it. One of the attributes of yin is receptive and being cold, which is not necessarily evil, but it is kind of, as I said earlier, a inward pull towards oneself, an inward pull into being cold-minded and cold thinking, rather than being more so concerned with others. You're just cold and receptive, and you're thinking of your own self-interest. Well, yang would be the opposite of that, which has its own place in the world, right? So Wan later befriends Rava, the spirit of light, and which would be the key to harmony, because balance would be achieved within Wan, which would then allow Wan to start to become a bridge between the spirit world and the human world. Now, kind of going into episode 8, beginnings part 2. Juan merges with Rava during harmonic convergence, becoming the first avatar. And, we have that huge line where he's like, where Rava speaks from Juan and says, we are bonded forever. And this starts the first cycle of being the avatar. And that moment is really, really huge in the show, and it really comes through in a huge way. He separates Rava and Vatu but cannot destroy either, learning that light and darkness must coexist. And see, that is still the orange morality in the show, still existing. It is not full-on Christianic dark and light and good and evil, Jesus and Satan. It does have certain ties to that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the spirits are just either one way or the other way. Now, I understand that due to how the spirits look when they are under Vatu's influence, or due to how the spirits look when they are not necessarily calm, but that they are rather ravagous and being chaotic, right? I understand how that can look, but that doesn't necessarily mean 110% that they are evil. They're just allowing all the yin elements, all the yin parts of them to come to the center, which would then create imbalance. And then you can also argue, even if there is too much yang energy, too much Rava, that would manifest itself into a spirit, then it would also cause its own imbalance, just a little bit different than what Vatu's influence would be. Because think about it. It doesn't, when spirit bending takes water and it swirls it around a spirit and it purifies them, you are not purely getting rid of the yin energy. You are bringing it into balance, and you are bringing in the yang element back into the yin element in order to form a balance. That doesn't necessarily mean good and evil. That means your spirit is back in alignment with having equal parts yin energy and equal parts yang energy, right? Okay, so we are in the middle, of beginnings part 2. Korra realizes that Unalaq intends to free Vatu and reshape the whole world through chaos, mirroring Juan's ancient mistake. Now, the theme is balance is not the absence of darkness, but mastery over it, which is exactly what I just went on here for about the last 7 to 10 minutes, is that it is not the absence, it is just simply the mastery. But I kind of dwelled on that a little bit too much, so we're going to move on now to episode 9, the guide. Korra enters the spirit world to rescue Jinora, who is lost there. She learns that the spirit world responds more to emotional truth than force. Unalaq manipulates Korra's journey to locate the second spirit portal. Jinora demonstrates remarkable spiritual intuition, hinting at her future importance. Because Jinora, as a central character in the Avatar universe, is someone who grows to be an incredibly strong leader, not necessarily because of who she is or just her innate personality, but how close she gets to the spirit world, which I would argue puts just such a heavy emphasis on how important the spirit world still is in season 2 of The Legend of Korra. It is still such a central, huge binding force of the narrative. 10. A new spiritual age. Unalaq opens the northern spirit portal, freeing Vatu. Korra battles Unalaq but is defeated. The spirit world and the human world become permanently intertwined as both portals remain open. The stakes shift from political conflict to cosmic imbalance. And what does Unalaq do here? He is not necessarily infecting the world with himself. He is just simply bringing the world out of imbalance, because the Avatar's journey, the Avatar's role is to bring balance, and Unalaq, even as if he was acting as a dark avatar, all he's simply doing is removing the balance from the world. He's infecting it with too much of one of the yin and yang principles, and he is not even necessarily saying the world is being ran over by evil spirits. No, he's causing chaos, a chaos which is an element of the yin part of the yin and yang cycle, of the yin and yang acrofecture, that shape, and is bringing the world into much more of a yin balance rather than having Korra, the avatar, bring the world into a yin and yang balance, because Korra does not ever want to destroy evil. Korra just wants to bring the world into balance. That's all she wants to do. That's all she wants to do, y'all. That's all she wants to do. Okay. And the theme of episode 10 here is unchecked ambition can reshape the world better or for worse, which that could be on either side. Unchecked ambition for Unalaq, which has the influence of Vatu, can reshape the world for better or for worse, and same with Korra and the spirit of Brava. Episode 11, The Night of 1,000 Stars. As harmonic convergence nears, Unalaq merges with Vatu to become the Dark Avatar. The world prepares for an unprecedented spiritual catastrophe. Korra realizes this conflict transcends nations and ideologies. It's about existence itself. Power without balance becomes destruction. And that is, yes, when he becomes the Dark Avatar, and he is essentially trying to force the world into being essentially brought underneath his heel of control and cause ruin. The battle continues. Harmonic convergence. Unalaq destroys Rava, severing Korra's connection to her past life. This is one of the most devastating moments in the series, symbolizing the loss of tradition, history, and guidance. Korra survives but feels spiritually hollow and alone. Identity is tested when everything familiar is stripped away. And episode 12 here, it's a very, very sad and heavy part in the series, because this is when we see the Avatar removed from Brava. And this is important here because not only does it show that, like, yes, obviously Korra is without Rava, Korra is without the Avatar spirit, but now Korra is alone, and Korra isolated and alone and feeling completely separated from the past life, feeling completely separated from her power, and completely feeling powerless, because Korra is a character that demands power. Korra is a character that respects power above all else, and Korra is a character that essentially feels so good about themselves and puts a lot of her identity into being powerful. We see that through all of her bending throughout the entire show. She demonstrates with power and she demonstrates with force. That doesn't necessarily mean that she's just headstrong and that she's an evil avatar. That just means that she respects power, and we see that in the beginning of the season when she respects Unalaq in the first place. Why? Because of his demonstration of power. So she falls after that, and now what happens? She was without power, and she feels like a hollow shell of herself, because without that power, you see how all the themes are pulling together now? Without all of that power, she feels alone. She feels like she doesn't know what her role is as the Avatar is in current day. So, with Darkness Falls. With Janora's spiritual light guiding her, Korra reconnects with Rava's essence. She learns that hope and balance can be reborn even after apparent destruction. Korra embraces her role not as a bridge bound by the past, but as a creator of the new future. Theme: even shattered legacies can give rise to renewal. The entire series, I would say, is about this one episode right here, about radical change, about Korra understanding that the past is important, but breaking away from her past so that way she can be a brand new avatar for what the people of the current age and what the people of the current society and what the current new benders that are about to come into play. Because remember, after we get into harmonic convergence, and after harmonic convergence completes itself, we get the new rise of airbenders that are going to happen in season 3. And in season 3, y'all, that is the best season of the entire series, and we are going to deep dive episode by episode and make whole videos just based off of the entire episodes alone, and just go through all of that, because season 3 is packed with so much goodness from a writing standpoint, and I'm so excited to get into that. So that's what the entire season and series is about. Korra, episode 14, Light in the Dark. Korra defeats Unalaq and restores Rava, but the past avatars remain lost forever. Rather than restoring the old world, Korra chooses to keep the spirit portals open, allowing humans and spirits to coexist. This decision marks the end of the old avatar cycle, but the beginning of a new spiritual era. Theme: progress requires letting go of the past. This entire season is so chock filled with foreshadowing all the way up to harmonic convergence, to Korra letting go of the past avatar cycles, to Korra holding on to a new world, finding her own identity, not in the place of power, not in the place of statute, not in the place of history, but of who she is and how she can genuinely change the world. And season 3 is all about the aftermath of the season. It is all about the aftermath of Korra stepping into what she truly believes is the way of the new avatar. Thank you so much, my friends, for hanging with us and chilling with us as we went through this entire season, as we kind of summarized a little bit and then expounded. Season 2, it's not bad. Season 2 is not as terrible as people like to claim that it is. It is a whole series. It is a whole season that lines up perfectly into a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful culmination of letting go of the old and inviting the new. So join me either later this week or next week as we start to deep dive into every single episode of season 1. And we're just going to take it episode by episode. We're not going to do like this video. I just felt like this video was important because this kind of like brings us to what season 3 is all about. So I will catch you guys next time. Thank you so much for listening. I will see y'all later.